Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher, here in New York after a quick trip to Vegas that had mixed results I'll get to in a minute. Hope you guys enjoyed last week's episode when I was in Vegas and I had a chance to sit out the podcast and just enjoy our friends Danny and Derek doing their thing, which I thought was a really fun episode. Make sure you check that out if you haven't. But today, I'm really excited because we have a guest coming on right now that you guys have been clamoring for. He is one of the most popular coaches on TPE and one of the most dynamic and interesting people in the poker world. Please welcome the Assassinato himself. Alex Fitzgerald is on the program. Hey, Alex, how's it going?
Hey, Clayton. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so we're both in New York, but we still couldn't manage to get it together today, could we? We had to do a Skype call anyway.
Yeah, that's my fault. That's not your fault. Just a lot going on right now, so it's hard to find the time to. Well, and with the trains in New York, you never know how long it's going to take, right? So you want to do an hour podcast, and it ends up being 4 hours. But yeah, that was completely on me.
I wasn't going to call you out on it, but yeah, it is your fault. So you got a lot going on. What is going on with you these days?
I'm still coaching quite a bit. A lot of it is just writing down different concepts and trying to get it right, and then coaching and staging. At some point in the next year, I think I'm going to come back and play a lot more poker. I'm playing online right now, but maybe play some live. I actually love live poker quite a bit, but the problem is it's so hard to get hands in. So you got to really justify it, and not so much financially, but is this going to be meaningful to you? Is this going to be fun to head out to Atlantic City and stuff like that? So just been doing the coaching, trying to pay bills, take care of the family, and then also set myself up to play perhaps a little bit more in Vegas for the WSOP, perhaps more of these Atlantic City tournaments, Philadelphia tournaments, Baltimore, Montreal, anything that's, the Port Authority tour, whatever, whatever, I'm the cheapest person you'll find when it comes to this stuff, right? It's, I take a Greyhound to those places because it costs $20, and I used to do my taxes, and at the end of the year, I spent $25,000 on travel, and I only made $50,000 on the tour this year. Maybe even some years you're just negative, right? And that $25,000 is just like insult to injury.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. For those who don't know, the Port Authority is the name of the bus terminal here in New York. So when he says the Port Authority tour, he means any place you can get to on a Greyhound from New York City.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That and Las Vegas. And you only do Las Vegas during the series because that's when everybody shows up to make their claim and you can actually get in there and cause some damage.
Yeah. The listeners know I'm that guy that waits on pins and needles for the schedule to come out, and right away I start looking at the tournaments and how they change the World Series of Poker every year and what the differences are going to be, and I start making my schedule the day the schedule comes out because as far as live poker goes, it is the best. Are you the same? Have you had a chance to look at it yet? Do you get excited like I do?
I get excited, but it's so strange. I'm obviously very lucky in the fact that I get to analyze poker for a living. That's a tremendous opportunity because you get to – the cool thing about poker is if you were a soccer player, you have to pick when your career as a player ends and when your career as a manager begins or a coach or an analyst or whatever it is. In poker, you get to go between roles, and that's really fun because seeing the bird's eye view through the analytics and coaching and everything like that actually helps you become a better player, and playing helps you be a better coach and vice versa. The thing is, I've just been focusing on coaching so much for the last year or two, just because, well, you got to strike while the iron's hot. And there was also some stuff going on with my family that I was taking care of, and financial stability became a bigger deal. But yeah, I get just as excited, and there's nothing worse than being in Vegas and not having a friend like you, Clayton, where it's like, what am I supposed to be playing today? You tell me. Well, let me tell you. There's 5 tournaments going on. You always need that friend. Usually Carlos Welch.
Carlos knows everything that's going on in town. Yeah, he's got it down.
It's pretty much, Carlos. When I was in Vegas, Carlos is the man at sleeping on the floor and telling me where I'm supposed to be that day. And he picks the best ones. It's like, go to Planet. He's like, it's almost like Yoda, go to Planet Hollywood. There's easy money there. And then I go there, and sure enough, on that planetary system, there is some easy money.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Carlos, he's been a guest on this and probably every other podcast that's poker related a number of times. And yeah, he is definitely known for doing his research, knowing who's going to be where. I would think he would tell you to go to one location, then make sure that he was somewhere else.
Yeah, he kind of does that. It's like, you should be playing at the Venetian. Oh, man, I don't want to play at the Venetian. Where are you playing? I want to make some money today. I don't want to be sitting around with all these kids staring at me with their hoodies and their gelled hair and their big headphones and their 45-second time banks. I got better stuff to do today.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, we love Carlos too. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll just go through the schedule and figure out what I want to play, and then if I get a clue that a lot of top players are planning to play the same thing that I was thinking about playing, I will sometimes change my mind. But even then, I find that even like in some huge tournament that everybody seems to think they want to play, it's still the luck of the draw what kind of table I end up being at. In other words, one amazing player isn't going to ruin my table if everybody else is average. So, yeah, but yeah, I'm just getting excited. Even just now talking about it, I'm getting excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I did have a kind of a mixed bag last week. I got to do some comedy at this charity event that Daniel Negreanu put together for St. Jude's.
Far out.
Yeah,
cool.
Actually, Matt Stout was one of the organizers, and he invited me to perform. And, that was kind of a life-changing experience. Just, in between the comedy sets, they had, videos of what goes on at the hospital and how children survive cancer and, like, all the research they're doing to try to make sure that no child ever gets cancer. And, just kind of like big picture stuff that make you say, man, I'm never going to be upset about anything ever again in my life, right? And
yes,
then
sir.
2 days later, that theory gets tested when I go out and play, and when I come home, my hotel room has been burglarized.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I was
Sorry.
like, Clayton, you just told yourself 2 days ago that you're never going to get upset about anything ever again. And now here's something to be upset about. I mean, they got my laptop, they got my passport,
no.
they got a bunch of
my
stuff.
God. It's like, just leave the passport, save me the paperwork. You
I
can
know.
have the laptop. That is brutal.
You're not going to fly anywhere with my picture.
Yeah,
Come on,
come on now. Yeah, like anyone's really going to forward you. Well, I guess they could, but that, from what I've heard, that takes a lot of technology. But no, I'm right with you there. It's hard to keep a perspective because you're only with yourself every day. So you're competing against yourself. And yeah, when your hotel room gets burglarized, that's a pretty bad day, regardless of what other people are going through. It's hard to keep perspective on that. If you kept any perspective, period, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I felt pretty proud of myself because, one thing I was upset about at first was I had just bought this brand new winter coat because I'm kind of like Carlos. I like a bargain. I like to buy my winter coat at the end of winter.
Smart.
And, I had to take the coat to get from my apartment to the airport, but I probably didn't need that winter coat in Vegas,
no.
And then I come home and, I get home from Vegas and it's still a little bit cold. I need to go buy a new winter coat. But then, I started thinking about it, and what helps me sleep now at night is just thinking that maybe the person who burglarized my room was homeless. and it's been a little chilly in Vegas. It even snowed last week one day. So maybe this guy, he just needed a coat. And I try to look at it like, well, maybe I just I donated a coat to the homeless.
That's a good one. I had a very rude comment go through my head, but I'm not going to say it, which is terrible podcasting, but I'm trying to be better. It was, but no, that's a very good, not anything about you, but I was thinking, you are a saint, because what I would be hoping for that person is much different than what you were hoping.
Yeah,
you're good for you.
Yeah, you're not hoping that he can stay warm, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're much better at that than I am.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that I'm trying to think that way, and not I hope that MF or it's just hard. But there are worse crimes to be a victim of. I keep thinking about that too. So. Whatever. Yeah. They got my things. It's just things. But yeah, I want to go back to something you were saying before about teaching and coaching and helping people with their poker, because that's something I've always enjoyed too. I've done some poker coaching. I'm not at the level of Alex Fitzgerald as a coach or anything like that. But just everything that I've ever been good at in my life, I've always kind of enjoyed helping other people learn how to do it. Like, for example, in college, I majored in music and theater, and some of my classmates didn't have the same music theory background that I had. My father was a musician, and I started learning all about music when I was just a boy. So, nice. And a lot of them were like failing music theory class because it's really hard to master. And my school was pretty tough on that stuff. And I said, if you ever want some extra tutoring, I won't charge you. And I used to just kind of enjoy helping people get it, because like when you kind of see a light bulb go off in another person's head. But even beyond that, and you could tell me if poker is the same for you, but for me, helping other people learn about music theory actually strengthened my relationship with music theory, where I understood it better and I loved it more.
There's a gentleman, Richard Feynman, Dr. Richard Feynman, who I think he was one of the guys who worked on the atom bomb. And if you ever read his books, this is a guy who could like teach himself Japanese in a matter of weeks. He played the drums. He was a space cadet before there were space cadets. And one of the things he said was, if you want to be great at something, you got to teach it. That's just the thing it is. And this is a guy who's one of the brightest scientists of this generation. He was saying you do have to teach. And I didn't understand that. I read Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, when I was 21, a great book if anybody ever wants to check it out. And I didn't really get that. And then I started poker coaching just because the swings in tournament poker are tremendous. And if you're supporting anybody on top of that, it can get very stressful very quickly. So having some money coming in for the groceries and whatnot is a great assistance. But yeah, I felt like you felt as I got into it, which was, it's pretty fun to help Granny 3-bet. It's really fun. It's pretty cool to get the email. I'd never made a final table before. I took fourth last night. I just made $3,300. And it feels great because, the 100 they paid you or whatever, they just got paid back 33 times back. And you feel this has got to be the most ethical business on earth, right? And then I'm sitting here, a guy who barely graduated high school, just got $100 in an hour. I'm feeling awesome, right? That's you got to be an actuary or something to make that kind of money.
Right.
And right. So it was to me it seemed really win-win. And then I got kind of addicted to coaching better because I'm really into just following sports and everything. And I started thinking, well, Bill Belichick is an amazing person to everyone in the United States for what he's done with the New England Patriots. Why are there not poker coaches who aspire to be at that level? So I started studying what those guys did, and I actually found the Navy SEALs and Bill Belichick do the exact same thing, which is they have found that people in the heat of the moment cannot remember more than 3 things. The Navy SEALs talk about, and a lot of these guys are, multilingual bodybuilding demolitions experts. So if they can't remember 3 things at a time, I don't know who can. And it was really fun to simplify poker more and more and more and get it to very crucial questions and to beat it into people's heads. And it's very thrilling if you have a good year in poker, you could be a good poker player or you could be running hot. But if you got 200 guys winning, you're right. And then when you get back into the game, the really good thing for me is it does not matter how jet lagged I am now. It does not matter how tired I am. It does not matter what is going on in my life. I can hear my voice, how I talk to poker players in those lessons. So I will not make the same mistakes, because what I'm thinking is, you hypocrite, you tell them not to do this. Why would you do that? So that's really helped my professional career. I've only gotten to play 5 live tournaments a year for the past 3 years, but I was lucky enough in the ass end of 2016, December, I showed up for WPT Prague, and obviously that's quite a bit of jet lag. That's about 9 hours. And I final tabled the tournament even with the jet lag, because I could just hear my sessions with my students in my head and all the fundamentals that we had worked on. The more you teach it, the more it becomes a part of you. So it really feels like the best business in the world. You're helping other people. They're making more money than what they paid you. And if they're not making more money than what they paid you, you're not doing a good enough job. They're making more money than they paid. You're making money. You're becoming a better poker player. I honestly feel like it's the American dream. I cannot imagine a luckier person than myself.
That's a great attitude to have. And, I think you're so right, because I also work with comedians from time to time. I'm a professional stand-up comedian, and I'll also take time with some of the up-and-coming, hungry, young comedians that want to get better, and I'll look at their stuff with them, and I'll give them advice, and I'll do basically coaching with them.
Nice.
It's a little hard to teach comedy, because in a sense there are no rules. But there also are, generally speaking, if you do this, it's probably a mistake. And if you do that, it's probably a mistake, that kind of thing. But yeah, I feel like it helps me avoid some of the pitfalls that other guys that have been around for a while might fall into, because they're not having that constant reinforcement of the basics, which when you're working with someone that's at the beginning, you have to start with the basics. And that just reinforces my fundamentals. In that way. And likewise, doing this podcast, I get to talk poker with people at all different levels. So sometimes I'm talking to someone that's, obviously a really accomplished player, coach, author like yourself. And then other times, I'm getting emails from people that are like, you guys keep talking about 3 bets. What is that? And it's kind of nice. I get to see all perspectives and understand that not everyone is at the same point in his or her relationship with this game that I love as I am. So I'm kind of having my own love affair with poker for the last 20 years. But there are other people that might just be on their honeymoon. And that's so I need to respect that too. I wanted to ask you about your books, if that's all right, unless you wanted to say something else about that.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Obviously, if I had hiked my ass down to where you lived, and you could see me when I was about to talk, but that's my fault. So sorry for me talking over you. But the thing I was going to say is it's really cool you have that perspective. Because I remember, what was his name? Dat Fan, the comic. Sure. When he won Last Comic Standing, I remember that dude showing his analytics during his set. He was saying ooh, there was a lull here for 45 seconds. What did I do during that punchline? And he was watching the tape, and I was watching. I don't know how I feel about his comedy or whatever, but I was just I love this dude. I love how he's hustling for it, right? If you've got that attitude with comedy, man, poker, I just want you to know, poker is, the greatest thing about poker is, you and me can watch Kobe do a jump shot. We're never going to have Kobe's jump shot. But you can watch a poker hand, and you can take that play if you work hard enough. That's really cool that you've developed that love for deliberate practice in your day job, and you're taking it to poker. You're not just keeping it in one focus. That'll bounce back and forth and help you out. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just thought that was really cool, and I wanted to rant a little bit about it. What was the question you were going to ask?
Yeah, no. Hey, anytime you want to interrupt me to give me a compliment, I accept.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to ask you, actually, well, first off, I want to say Dat Fan is actually a friend of mine. And,
cool.
Yeah, I'm a fan of his too, and I really respect his approach. Like, some people think, oh, well, you're not really an artist if you're just trying to be analytical. But I think, with comedy, there is a lot of analysis that needs to happen in order to really get good at it. But what I wanted to bring up was actually, you got there with the Kobe thing. Like, do you really think there's no such thing as poker talent? Because you have a book, and its title is The Myth of Poker Talent, Why Anyone Can Be a Great Poker Player. I know you have a newer book as well, but I want to ask you about this one because I am not convinced that talent doesn't exist in this game. Is that just a marketing ploy to have a title that kind of grabs attention, or do you really think that?
Well, here's the thing. When you walk into a bookstore, I want you to remember this the next time you guys walk into a bookstore. Every book you walk past is a year of someone's life. So when you walk past the bookcase, you just walked past 380 years of some people's lives. And if that title didn't catch you, you didn't grab it. You didn't care. You couldn't be bothered. And by the way, that's not your fault. That's how life is. People need to be grabbed. So I picked that title so you would grab that book. Now, here's the thing. Does poker talent exist? Abso-effing-lutely, right? There is, I don't know what pros I'm allowed to talk about or whatever, but every time you can just watch Phil Ivey back in his prime. Oh my Lord, the guy 5-betting with nothing. Or you watch like Phil Board or Cal 42688. I could bring up 100 names of guys that just have uncanny reads. But the fact is, most poker professionals, I would say about 99% of them, are working class pros. It's a whole lot of the basics. It's a whole lot of opening when people aren't going to 3-bet you. It's 3-betting a guy who opens too much, getting him to call with too many hands and getting him to fold on the flop. It's a whole lot of having a reason to c-bet and knowing when the guy's all over the board and just checking and giving up. It's a whole lot of, if you are going to defend from the big blind, you got to have a plan to check raise or something, right? It's a whole lot of working class poker things, in my opinion. And I wanted people to know twofold. One, you can become a competent poker pro. I have never been more than a competent poker pro. I work harder than most other people. That's just because I have crazy anxiety, so it feels better to work than it does to sit around doing nothing. That has nothing to do with my discipline. But you can be a competent poker pro just like me if you work hard. That's it. All you have to do is study, and you have to get it to the point where somebody could wake you up in the middle of the night, scream a situation at you, and you would have the answer in 5 to 10 seconds. And all that takes is hard work. It takes a lot of hard work. And I said that in the book at the beginning, which was like, everybody who told you that 10,000 hour rule, 10,000 hours to true mastery. There's a lot of people driving in Queens that have been driving for 10,000 hours and they still don't know how a blinker works. So that doesn't mean anything, right? And the second thing I wanted to say was also you shouldn't be intimidated by poker pros. Most of these guys are just the average working guy in poker. A lot of the basics. He doesn't want to do a double barrel or a triple barrel either. He hopes you don't take it there. But I can teach you how to take it there. And most of the time he's got, like you said at the beginning, there's one good player at the table. That doesn't really bother you much. Well, you're somebody who studies poker. And even you, all of us, I have to do this too. When there's a good player at the table, I just leave him alone. If there's 7 other guys, you can be that guy that the pro leaves alone if you just work hard and study. But yeah, am I 6-bet bluffing correctly? There are guys that can look at you and know if you have it. I've played with them. That happens. I had a guy look at me one time and call me with 4th pair when I bet the farm on the river. The line made perfect sense and all of that. The guy just I either got a physical tell or he just picked up on it somehow. Those guys exist, and I've watched that guy long enough to know he's usually right when he does that, so I don't think he's haplessly calling. Poker talent does exist. It's just not where you look for it. Most of the time, these are just working pros that you can emulate.
Right. Yeah, I really like your Kobe Bryant analogy because, yeah, unlike with basketball, we actually can emulate these other people and figure some things out. What's it like writing a book? You've written a few books now. I think you've written 2 books and then you co-authored a third. Is that right?
Yeah, I co-authored, I self-published one. A buddy of mine, it was a guy I used to back with when I was in Europe, and he's just one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to backing and how much money you need and what investments are good, what investments are not good. And he had a bunch of research, but he wanted me to punch it up a little bit. So I wrote some smaller sections about staking in that. That was sharp staking. I wrote exploitative play in live poker by myself, the myth of poker talent by myself. And I co-authored, I was also in some compilations and stuff like that. So what's it like? Was that the question?
Yeah, just that? Kind of, what's the process? I think a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge about a subject might think, oh, I should write a book someday. Maybe kind of describe your process for going from the idea of, hey, I could write a book about poker to actually being one of the few people that follows through and ends up with a book on the shelf. How does that happen?
Sure. Well, I'm going to try to not filter my answer at all because when I was trying to be a writer, I got fed a lot of crap about what a writing process is. I'll tell you what works for me. I go into my office, I close the door, I turn on death metal, I drink a ton of coffee, and I write as fast as possible. Because here's the thing. If you are writing and editing, you're going between the two halves of your brain. Editing is the analytical part of your brain. Writing is the creative part of your brain. So if you keep going back and forth, you're just going to exhaust yourself really quick. And that's how you get to 800 words. And you go, how the hell do these people write so much? I can write 10,000 words in a day. Doesn't mean those 10,000 words are good. It's just, so this is what happened with those books. The Myth of Poker Talent was a little different because that was just years and years of work of just analysis and I wonder if this play works. Let's do an EV calc for that and stuff like that. So that book kind of fell into my lap. I just wanted, I wanted some publisher to pick it up, and it was pretty much done because it was all stuff I wanted my students to know anyway. So I was allowed to write in a compilation, and I just made sure I nailed that audition really well. And that was kind of from my same playbook. And then The Myth of Poker Talent was my total online poker playbook. And then exploitative play in live poker was the way I dreamed of that book was you got me a couple beers deep at a bar and you said, my dream is to be a poker player. And I took pity on you and I said, here, listen, this is what you got to do. That was how I dreamed of that book, because one thing about poker players is, much like politicians, they always want to sound like the smartest guy in the room. The problem is with coaching, usually the more you dumb it down, the better a coach you are. If you get them 80 to 90% of the way there, you've done an amazing job. And that last 10% is going to take them 10 years to figure out anyway. But your job, mostly your job when somebody buys a poker book and it's the second or third poker book they bought, is to get them to 80 to 90%. So with exploitative play in live poker, I just sat here, drank as much coffee as possible, wrote as fast as possible, turned on music loud enough to stop me from doubting myself and overthinking, never let myself stop writing. And then when it was done, I triumphantly sent it to my publisher. They said, what is this? Rewrite it. Half of this is crap. And I went, okay, you're right. I looked at it and I went, wow, this really is. And then I cut that half. I wrote more. And it's kind of like discovering a fossil is what I think Stephen King put it as. You start with, what did Anne Lamott call it? The first, or Ernest Hemingway, I think, was the one who said, like, the first draft of anything is crap, right? Although he didn't say crap, right? He said the first draft of anything is terrible. So you take your first draft, and you got to be really judicious. Now you turn on that analytical hat. You cut as much as possible. If you read it and it's not that interesting to you, you're the one who wrote it. If it's not interesting to you, it sure as hell is not going to be as interesting to anyone else. If you read 5 sentences and you think you could get it down to 2, cut that, right? And the truth is, I'm not that good of a writer, but because I cut a lot of fat, like Exploitative Play in Live Poker has, I think 80 reviews now, and I think the average score is 4.7. And if you read that book, I am not writing that well as a pure writer in that book. Sentence structure could be better. Paragraph structure could be better. But since so much of the fat is trimmed, and because there's so many times 5 sentences is compounded into 1, it becomes memorable, it becomes fun, it becomes snappy to the reader, and people enjoy it. And more importantly, it's memorable, which you need at the poker table, because when the adrenaline starts flowing, you're not going to remember something that's very convoluted. That more or less is my process.
Wow, it's great. It really it strikes me how similar that is to my process of developing stand-up. You know, people ask me all the time, how hard is it to come up with material? It's easy to come up with material. It's hard to come up with anything that's actually useful. Right. Well, it's about cutting, editing. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but isn't that Jerry Seinfeld's thing, which was his whole thing was he wrote jokes every single day and 90% of them were garbage, but at the end of the year, he just looked like a genius, right? Because he was writing more than everybody else, and he kept the 10% that he workshopped really well and went really well. Wasn't that his thing?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, that's the process that all great comedians have to go through is, like, you have an idea, you try it out, it's no good. You try it again, it's still no good. You try it again, it sucks even worse. You try it again, and they laugh a little, and now we're on to something. You know, it's just, right. It's a very painful life. There's so much bombing that you have to get through. Bombing would be the equivalent of you sending those pages to your publisher and him saying, "What the heck is this?" Start over, write it again. Exactly. It's no good. Yeah.
No, they. To be clear, I feel like I should give D&B Publishing their props. They were very kind throughout the entire process. They did a really good job in saying, like, this section isn't really helpful. This section is not really helpful. But yeah, it is kind of like bombing, I guess, right? Like, nobody finds this section interesting, and then you reread it. Damn it, that isn't good. Yeah. I thought it was good, right?
Yeah. And you have to remove your ego and let somebody else criticize your work. Like, all of that stuff puts you as the writer in a vulnerable state.
See, that's why you got to have zero self-esteem, and then you're just fine, right? If somebody robbed you of your self-esteem at some point, that's a gift. You can just keep going now. But yeah, what's the phrase? Kill your darlings. That's the big trick for great writing, is just you cut more than the other guy. If the other guy isn't cutting, it's kind of like, instead of it being a stiff drink, it's been really watered down. People like snappy, keeps going and everything. Yeah, I have never been on a poker podcast and discussed the writing process. This is fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I know some people are definitely itching to get to some strategy and stuff, but I wanted to talk to you about these things because, to me, it's all interlinked. You know, the way your brain works makes you a better writer, a better coach, and ultimately a better poker player. So yeah, for sure. Yeah, but they did not rob me of my self-esteem. They just got my passport.
Oh, damn. That sucks.
Yeah. They got the passport, the coat. I'm still missing some of my things. But, yeah, all right. So let's get into TPE. I mean, you are one of the most popular coaches on the website. Tell us what you've been working on and your approach to making videos.
Well, I've been working on this hand history review for a while. It's just I had 3-4 weeks, a bunch of stuff came up. It looks like everything's really calm right now. So I actually have a couple videos done that I did this week coming up. But something that's been really fun has been analyzing this one TPE member's hand history. And that's really fun because you familiarize yourself with what starting players are not. He's not really starting, intermediate, getting to advanced players are thinking, and you see, oh, okay, I could do this better or I could do that better. And it's a whole lot of nuts and bolts. My basics are very different than other people's basics. So I try to include them always. So what I usually do, it's not super convoluted, but it will help you out when you do training videos. The problem with most guys when they do training videos is they don't really go in there with a plan. So they have flashes of brilliance, and then they kind of need to wait till the next hit. So it's kind of like good writing. You just want to hit the really powerful stuff. So something I'll do is I'll skim, not really skim the hand history, but I'll skim my concepts that I think are likely to come up, and I make a checklist, a pilot's checklist. You got to hit this at one point. You got to hit this at one point. You got to hit this at some point. And yeah, that's what ends up happening is you try to put it into a conversational tone. The thing I like about the TPE videos is I get to make it more of a conversation. TPE is nice enough to let me do on what I really missed, which was like long form analysis. Like, let me watch you play 800 hands and I'll tell you about your poker game. Let me tell you about your poker game. But the fun thing when you have the long form is you can keep slipping in the stuff that might be in a poker book, but people don't see it in a practical application. They don't see, oh, if I did this instead of that I would have been more prepared for this flop and I could have done this, or, oh, he tabled that hand, but if I had done this, he likely would have folded that. So it's very much taking you onto the practice field and throwing you some pitches. I really like the hand history reviews. I did do one PowerPoint. That was really fun. And the stuff I got coming up, we have a Euro tournament that a person wants me to review. And I thought that would be pretty fun because that is a whole other can of worms.
A what tournament?
A Euro tournament. Like it was a tournament on a Euro site, right?
Okay.
So yeah, one of them was on PokerStars. The other fun thing with TPE is I get to talk about the different player bases. So I used some of my final tables and said, like, hey, this is how I beat around Americans. You can try this in your local card room, thrashing bums for fun and profit. And then you can go to Europe and it's like, okay, some of these people have seen a training course before. This is how you mess them up a little bit. And then on PokerStars.com, that's a very different animal because you have everyone from the local punter down the street in Ireland to guy in Canada chilling out watching hockey to Swedish cyborg to Estonian guy working med school hours to make a couple thousand a month not from rakeback anymore, but from just grinding it out. And all those guys play different. The grinded out pros, whenever you test them, they're going to fold. The Scandi countries where, a beer is $20, they're probably not going to be doing much folding in a $33 tournament. If the guy's Peruvian, now you can get away with some other things because $33 to that person is a significant amount of someone's salary. And you don't, with a lot of the hand history reviews, you want to keep it to basics and essentials and stuff like that. But something I've been having fun with is I'll stop in the middle of the hand and I'll go, if you're readless, you can do this. If you're in a tournament in Las Vegas, you can do this. And if the person is this kind of person in Europe, you can do this. And that's been really fun as a coach because you feel like you're preparing people for wherever they're going to play, whatever stakes they're at. That is really a joy.
Well, as someone who spends a good amount of time in Sweden, I'm trying to find where these cheap $20 beers are.
it's really bad, right? I've heard it's terrible. I've actually only ever been to Denmark, but that was enough. I heard Denmark was cheap, and then I ordered like fish one time at a local restaurant. I ordered a fish and a beer, and it was $89 or something like that. And I was just, I was thinking, well, I guess we're living off oatmeal for the next 2 weeks because I can't afford this.
Look, if two New Yorkers are saying a place is expensive, that place is expensive.
Yeah, well said.
Trust me on that one. Well, that's really interesting. I never really, I guess maybe I do on some level, but I never really broke it down in my mind of doing kind of the foreign exchange on how much this money might mean to my opponent. The difference between a $33 buy-in to a player in Sweden is very different than someone if I look him up and he's in Peru or someplace like that. So that's kind of a nice little a way to kind of profile your opponents just based on what country they're in and what the dollar is worth there, or the euro, whatever is worth in those places. That's interesting to me.
Oh yeah, and if you want to take this to live poker, just every time I see a guy show up late for a live tournament, I think missed opportunity. Whenever I show up late for a live tournament, I want to punch myself, because if you just show up 15 minutes early and watch everybody slide their passport across, you are going to get to learn a lot about those people. You can even do this in the States. If someone shows their driver's license and they're from Arkansas, that's a much different deal than it's from California, right? Somebody from California who's been around live poker a lot, it's very hard to make you're making decent money if you're living in San Diego or Sacramento or Los Angeles or San Francisco, right? Versus the guy that slides across Arkansas, well, that's a little bit different, right? This guy either has money from independent industry that he's fine playing with, or he's really good at what he does, playing cards. But it does give you some perspective. And when you're playing EPTs or the WPTs over there, you got to look at the passports, right? And you got to get good at knowing what color means what, right? If the guy's from London, he is not folding, period, ever, right? He's just sharp, and the pound sterling is so strong, he most likely doesn't care about this. Whereas, there's other countries in the eastern part of Europe where it is quite a substantial buy-in if they made it there. So that kid's either a cyborg who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, or he satellited in and he's crapping himself right now. And that's the guy you can triple barrel, right? By the way, guys, if you're ever playing a live tournament, don't ever, ever let anyone know you satellited in. If they give you that sweatshirt that has satellite winner or whatever, do not open it, because that is a big sign to me that says triple barrel you. Because here's the thing. You traveled from Canada. You got to Prague. You told your girlfriend you were going to win this. You got in the airplane. You flew 10 hours. You went through immigration. You checked into your hotel. You slept. You woke up. You had your coffee. You ate breakfast. You showed up for the tournament. You've been picturing this for weeks. You've told everybody back home. You've looked forward to this for 2 months. If someone triple barrels you in the first 2 hours, there is a really good chance you are going to fold, right? And you will see people show up and look at their tournament ticket, and they'll hold it as if it's Willy Wonka's golden ticket, right? And it's like, and the coach in me is thinking, don't do that. But, the player in me is like, well, okay, buddy, every time you open, it's on. Right?
Yeah, whereas that's information. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Whereas if the kid shows up stoned and he's got the Cockney accent and he's got he's got $20,000 on him that he's wanting to show people, that's not a guy who wants to back down. He's trying to show you how sick he is at this game, right? You're not going to get a lot of folds out of him. It's different. Yeah, it's all information.
Well, it's interesting because in the last few minutes, you mentioned British players, and the hand that I wanted to run past you, it actually involves an opponent from England.
Nice.
So do you mind if we jump into that now?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. So this hand comes from a tournament that I played as part of the World Series of Poker last year, sometime around the end of June. I played in a 1K Super Turbo Bounty tournament. And it was a really fast structure. I mean, the blinds, I think they change every 15 minutes, and I think it was a one-day event. So it's a $300 bounty on every player, comes out of the 1K.
Wow.
Yeah, so this tournament's really about collecting bounties, I think. 'Cause that's where, obviously, like about a third of the prizes are coming right from that. So I was doing pretty well. They start with 5K. In the first level, I had doubled up, and I'm now at 11K. My table's been really good. The blinds are 75 and 150. Everybody at my table seems to be either inexperienced or, in other words, I'm not scared of anybody. There's been a lot of action at my table. Like, there have been pots where the pots got so big, I was like, well, that guy must have the nuts, and that other guy probably has second pair. And then at showdown, it's like one pair against another one pair. So it was like, just I find that's a big mistake that players tend to make, even in a super turbo bounty tournament, type of tournament. You don't want to just be getting it all in with one pair when you've got like 50 big blinds or something. So just to kind of set things up for you. The only player that's really been a problem is this British guy, two to my left. Of course, he's on my left. His name is Matthew Moss. You may even know him. He's a pretty accomplished professional player. He's got about $1 million in live cashes in his career. He's a young guy. He's British, and he seems to be trying to take advantage of the relative inexperience of most of our opponents. I'm trying to put this in a delicate way. He's beating up on the fish, okay?
Right.
So he opens under the gun +1, or as I like to call it, second position, because I'm old. And he's got 6,800, so he makes it 400 at 75 150. And everybody folds all the way back to me in the big blind, two to his right, and I'm holding the ace of spades, jack of clubs, and I have him covered, so we're playing his stack, 6,800 versus my 11,000. We're pretty deep. There's no antes yet. It's 75 150 with no ante. I don't know. I'll tell you. I don't want to tell you what I did yet. I wanted to hear your thoughts on whether I should call or raise. I don't think we want to fold ace jack here.
No. Well, first off, one thing about British players. This goes for, I just want an overall thing to teach you guys. Wherever people can play on the internet a lot, I want you to imagine someone who practices the piano 40 hours a week versus somebody who practices the piano 2 hours a week, and ask yourself who's going to get better. The thing that's amazing about the United States is a lot of people do not want to play online poker anymore, so they play live, so they never get to play. And just like the person who doesn't practice the piano, they don't get as proficient. So I love the United States. I love playing poker in the United States because there's a lot of money and not a lot of skill. Whereas if you look at like Canada, the United Kingdom, places where they can play online poker, they're going to be a little bit more adept. So if there's ever a guy to avoid, it would be the young British guy that is still training 40 hours a week. Now, with that in mind, I want to explain my decision right here in our big blind. My typical thing versus any young guy is to 3-bet here because, one, the average young guy can't fold a suited ace, can't fold a king-queen offsuit, and I mean that on the open or flatting the 3-bet. When they are in position, most people live, their folding is exactly 0. If the guy has 7-5 of diamonds there, I don't know if the average reg is folding that anymore, especially if he perceives the rest of the table to be weak, as you stated. So if this guy's opening 7-5 suited, and I don't know if he's folding, I don't think a lot of these guys are, you have a very clear 3-bet because what's going to happen is what he flats you with most of the time is going to be high cards. It's not going to be middle cards. It's not going to be low cards. People do not like to flat with 9-6. They like to flat with queen 9 suited, right? So if you see a board with 2 cards 9 or higher, that tends to have hit the opponent. You can lay off of that. Fortunately, you do have some coverage of that. So you could hit and most of the time just go with it. If you made it 1100 and then c-bet there, That would be how I tend to play against American regs, who I think have a really bad problem with discipline as far as pre-flop raising, and also have a really bad problem just folding pairs, period, post-flop. So I think you can 3-bet there for value versus American regs versus a guy who plays online most of the time. And it sounds like I don't know much about this guy, but I'm just going to assume if PokerStars is something he can sign up for, he probably is there a lot of the time. The people who play online poker like all the time, they start realizing you can't open 7-5 suited under the gun +1. You can't do that all the time. Or they just, because there's so much information over there now, there's so many guys professing the GTO stuff, and the GTO stuff is a little bit more careful on what you can open from earlier position. You can't make that assumption that he's opening that wide. You can't make that assumption that he's flatting that wide. This is also the only guy at the table, from what you've told me, we really are worried about. So what I would be focusing on at this table is minimizing the size of pots I play with this guy. And every time someone to my right opens who I think is opening a little too much, I would be 3-betting, freezing out this gentleman to my left, because I know I'm not going to get opens through. He knows how to 3-bet, but a lot of guys don't know how to cold 4-bet. And to be fair to him, he has no way of knowing that you're isolating with a Queen-9 suited or a Jack-8 suited when you 3-bet there. He's got to assume that you're 3-betting 5% of the hands, because that's what most people do. They 3-bet their 8s, 9s, 10s, Jacks, Queens, Kings, Aces, Ace, Queen plus, and a couple of bluffs. So I would be 3-bet freezing this guy out, trying to play poker where this guy doesn't exist. And for that reason, I would be calling here, because I don't want to play a big pot with this guy, because I don't know he's opening too much. I don't think he's flatting too much. We can go ahead and play here. So now I assume you called, because most people do call there. What'd you do?
I definitely thought about putting in a 3-bet. I mean, it occurred to me. Okay. It occurred to me that it might be profitable to build a pot here. And I didn't expect to get 4-bet bluffed a lot.
Right.
I expected him to flat the 3-bet all the time. As you said, I don't think people fold a lot, and I don't think they 4-bet a lot. So
that's very uncommon to find when you research poker. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's pretty uncommon. So I thought I definitely strongly considered putting in the 3-bet, but because we have so many other spots at the table, and because we're in such good shape, chip-wise, and, I just didn't feel like playing a huge pot out of position against this guy. Even though I don't think I'm going to make that many egregious post-flop mistakes, I just didn't feel like building the pot was correct when I had so many absolute amateurs at the table. So
Can I check to see if you make an egregious post-flop mistake? Like, this is how my coaching goes. I'm going to give you a hypothetical. You call here, the board comes ace 10 2. You check, he bets, you call. The turn is a 5. You check, he bets. What do you do?
I think I have to call again depending on how much he bets, but I think I do need to call a lot, because now my hand is basically a bluff catcher. Is that terrible?
Well, the thing that you find is many guys won't fire the second barrel on an ace-high board. Because think about it. I want you to imagine you develop a flush draw on an ace 10 2 5 board, okay? And let's say you got king queen of diamonds, the turn gives you a flush draw. Most guys are not going to fire that turn, because it's like, well, the guy check called me on the flop. He's probably got a lot of aces. So if he's not firing his flush draws, he's not firing a lot of bluffs. He's not firing his tens. So now here's the thing. You can call there, but you got to have a reason to do so. On that stack size, think about that stack size he opened from, 6.1K. So 400, so he c-bets, let's say 600, and the turn bet, you could maybe get away with it, right? But I see a lot of people call that turn, and then I get really worried, because on the river nobody folds, period, because curiosity equity is a hell of a thing. But it's the board I specifically picked there, ace 10, ace 2, ace 5 just outflopped you. So the hands that you're beating right now is him buying the showdown with ace 9, ace 8, ace 7, which is a very rare play, a double barrel bluff on an ace high board, which you'll see Eastern Europeans do, you'll see Russians do, you'll see some Brazilians do. Some Brits do it, but not a ton. So this is my only concern when people flat with aces, is not that they call the turn. Actually, calling turn is okay from the stack depth. But the problem is when most people call the turn, then they call the river, and that's when you have a really big issue, because now you're calling about 10x. It's very unlikely the guy's triple barrel bluffing. It's very difficult to find a guy who will triple barrel bluff on an ace-high board. And then if you give away that 10 big blinds, that's pretty much the ball game. Every time you 3-bet, well, I mean, to give you perspective on how much that is, kings on average makes about 4.55 big blinds if there's zero variance. So that's the equivalent. If you give away that 10x on the river, which most people will do because most people's fold on the river is like 20%, that's like getting kings, folding once, just pre-flop, you just fold, and then getting kings again and just going, I really got to take a leak, and folding again, right? It can be quite tremendous. So I do get worried when people just call, period, because here's the thing. If you 3-bet and take the initiative, most people are not going to raise you with a bluff. That is very difficult to find in any data. The average raise on the flop is 10% in everything I've ever seen live or online. The average check raise on the flop is 10%, everything I've seen live or online. And if you dig into that, you highlight those hands, 90% of them are 2-pair or better. Most people will raise their 2-pair or better, call with their pairs, and fold their high cards. So, sorry, as you can see, I think way too much about a poker hand, but so you call pre-flop, and then what happens?
Yeah. So, no, I love what you just did, because I think that's what we should all be doing, is planning ahead, like chess players. Well, if he does this, what am I going to do? And if that happens, How do I react? And no, I think this is great. And I mean, I think the listeners appreciate the fact that I didn't even tell you the flop yet, and you're already kind of planning what we would do. Yeah. Now, just because I said that I felt like I won't make any egregious post-flop mistakes doesn't mean that I didn't make any egregious post-flop mistakes.
Right.
But thankfully, the flop is not ace high. It actually comes king of diamonds, jack of diamonds, 7 of spades, and we have the ace jack with the ace of spades, jack of clubs. So we flopped a middle pair here. Now, my general approach to playing against aggressive, talented, accomplished, professional players who have position on me, I feel like in my career I've made a lot of money checking and calling against those kind of players. I don't really think that on this flop I'm going to have any donk leading range. In other words, I think if I'm calling, I'm pretty much forget pretty much. I'm always checking this flop against a player like this. Against other players, I might have a leading range.
Right. Definitely versus a very passive opponent, you could lead, but you gotta lead 3 streets typically, because if you lead flop, lead, turn, check, river, you just told the guy I have a pair or a misdraw. And unsurprisingly, most people play pretty damn well when they know what you have. And a lot of people subconsciously, even if they couldn't articulate that, they subconsciously get that, because that's one of the most common situations in poker is a guy bets and a guy gives up. But yeah, you definitely could have a donk lead there. I would structure that with a very small donk lead on the flop, because again, most people don't. If it is a passive opponent, you could go small donk lead, half pot, and you'll get paid off by queen, jack, jack 10, jack 9. Again, if the person is very weak and opening a lot, obviously this isn't the situation here. So I agree with you. It's probably better to check.
Cool. So I do check, and he bets 650 into 875, which is a big bet, and it's even bigger when I recall that in an earlier pot he had down bet the flop, like maybe he had raised to 400 and then bet like 350 on another flop, and in that hand he ended up showing down a bluff. So this bet is bigger. Now, I don't know if he's...
Hold on. I'm trying to... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm worried he's structuring he's structuring a big pot. There's a lot of guys, especially in Europe, that they're really big on the big bets. Because, okay, let's say he was trying to get you to fold out your ace highs. If he was trying to get you to fold out your high cards, a smaller bet could work there. the good thing about his 650 bet is like, well, if you got sevens, but I don't think he's expecting you to fold that. So I feel like he's structuring something here, which has me worried. But yeah, okay. So what do you end up doing?
Yeah, so I end up not liking my situation at all because I feel like because he had down bet with a bluff earlier and now he's betting, a good chunk of the pot, like 3/4 of the pot basically. I felt uncomfortable with my situation. I felt like if I fold, I'm folding the best hand too much, which isn't the worst mistake you can make. And I felt like if I call, I'm just getting owned a lot, and I think that's worse. I wanted to fold, but I called, so that's what I did.
Okay. So okay. Let me see if I got the board right. King of diamonds, jack of diamonds, two of clubs.
No.
Or what was the blank?
The blank is the 7 of spades.
7 of spades. Okay, and we have ace of spades, jack of clubs.
Correct.
Okay. Continue.
Yeah. So whereas pre-flop I wanted to 3-bet and just called. Now on the flop I wanted to fold and called. So so far I've already done two things that I didn't really want to do in this hand.
I like how you're playing this hand. I think your gut's telling you something that you can't articulate. I think you're fine so far. So what happens on the turn?
Okay, so that's good to hear. On the turn, the pot is 21.75, and the deuce of clubs hits. So now the board is king, jack, 7, deuce with 2 diamonds. And I check again, and my opponent bets 1,500 into 21.75, so roughly 3/4 of the pot again.
Okay, so he bets 3/4 of the pot. Mm-hmm. So, okay, hold on a second. I'm doing my math on my hands and toes because I can't go up that high. Thinking, hold on a second. So you're calling. Okay, so what do you need? Like 30% equity there? 75? Yeah. Okay, so he's betting 75% of the pot. If he is, so if he was betting 75 into 100, we would be calling 75 to win 250. So yeah, it's 0.3. So if I got that right. So anyway, you're okay. So you check. He bets. Here's the thing. How sure are you he's betting queen 10?
I don't really know how sure I can be because we're actually only about 40 minutes into this tournament. He has been, he's been the most active player at the table. Had he not been at this table, I would have been the most active player, but I've kind of shut myself down, especially when he's the first aggressor in a hand. Like I say, I tend to be more passive to exploit other people's over-aggressive behaviors.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's the problem you're running into. Let's say, what are the chances he's betting ace-6 of hearts on this turn?
Yeah, ace-6 of hearts, I don't think he's betting on this turn.
So he's got to have some semblance of something. So let's say he's got to have some semblance of something. Now, here was the problem I had for years when I tried to imagine poker hands. I'd say he's got a lot of flush draws on this board. Here's the problem. Okay, let's give him every flush draw we can. Ace queen of diamonds, ace 10 of diamonds, ace 9 of diamonds, ace 8 of diamonds, ace 7 of diamonds, ace 6 of diamonds, ace 5 of diamonds, ace 4 of diamonds, ace 3 of diamonds, ace 2 of diamonds. That is 9 combinations. You know what it also is 9 combinations is ace king. So one top pair accounts for is the same number of combinations as all the flush draws. And I haven't even counted king queen suited, king jack suited, king 10 suited, jack jack, that's a combo, king king, that's 3 combos, ace ace, that's 3 combos. If we include king queen offsuit, which I don't know if he's opening there, that's going to be another 9 combos. So essentially what I worry about here is you're going to have, if I'm looking at this right, if I'm playing around with my Flopzilla here, by the way, I'm not doing that in my head, by the way, guys, but my brain doesn't work that fast. But I mean, this is stuff you should do when you have the free time, right? But the big deal to have, whenever you're hero calling, there should be a lot of draws out there, right? There was one time, okay, brag post, but I called an all-in with King High in a WSOP 2K, and I was right, on the river. Now, here's the thing. There were six missed draws on the board between all the straight draws and flush draws, and I knew for a fact, if I have this right, this was the guy who had the tattoos, God forgives, I don't. So this was a guy who was shoving every single missed flush draw, right? And it just so happens when there's that many missed flush draws, there's a whole lot of air, right? And I got lucky. He totally could have been bluffing with like fourth pair, and he would have looked like a genius, and then I was walking my ass out of there, right? But here's the thing. When there's two draws, right, first of all, every flush draw, you can imagine, so ace deuce of diamonds, that is one combo. Ace three of diamonds, that is one combo. If you cannot give him a ton of flush draws, there's not that many combos. So if he calls out of the big blind, he's calling with anything halfway suited. That's a lot of combos. If he raises from the two position, as you put it, that tends to not be that many combos, especially if he's a disciplined Euro player, right? So that's going to just be the suited aces. So that's not that many combos. And then the other thing is, we know he's betting his top pairs. We know he's probably betting his over pairs. We know he's betting his two pairs, his sets, etc. But we're not positive he's firing all those open-ended straight draws. And if you take out those open-ended straight draws out there and leave in the flush draws, you're going to have about 24% equity. And you needed more than that to call there. And let's say, okay, let's throw in the open-ended straight draws and let's subtract the king-queen offsuit. Now, let's say you have 35% equity and you need 30 or whatever it is, right? Well, you have to now realize that equity. So you now have to realize that equity, see if I did this right, about 85% of the time, right? And there's still a river to play. And forgive me for saying this, I don't think we have any plan for the river, right? Like, we don't know what cards are good for us. We don't know what cards are and I think with a player like this, a really good question to ask yourself whenever you're playing, and I ask this question all the time, which is when you're on very thin ice, you have a pair and you're calling down. The question you got to ask yourself is, one, do I want him to check on the turn? Two, what percentage of the time is that going to happen? Now, they did all these studies where there's this book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and essentially the big takeaway is that people are systematically irrational. There was a guy who refuted that book, and he found people are actually pretty rational when they assign numbers to things. So the thing is, you have to assign a number in order to make your brain rational. So how often do we think he's firing that river? What percentage of the time would you say?
Well, I think he's probably firing the river about 30% of the time.
Yeah, at least 30. So that's a third of the time we have no idea what to do. Right, well, and we were on pretty thin ice already.
True, but let me just give you a little insight to what I was thinking, and then you can tell me, what's wrong with my logic. I don't expect him to fire the river with one pair very much. Okay. So I think when he fires the river,
fair enough.
Suppose he has king-queen or ace-king. I think most players, they've gotten plenty of value for their one-pair hand. And right. Just in case I'm slow playing something, they usually give up or maybe bet really small to try to squeak a little more value. But I think most players, like, they see like an ace-king type hand or even pocket aces here. Whether it's right or wrong, I think most players see those hands as a two streets of value situation. Right. And especially if these are value bets. These are large bets he's made. So I don't expect him to fire. So I think part of the 30% is monsters or at least two pair, and then all the missed draws, all the queen tens, all the ace queens he decided to fire again, whatever. When he has the ace of diamonds with his ace queen, I think he might make this bet again. So I think that a lot of the 30% is a bluff, and therefore my plan is basically to check and call again on the river most of the time when he bets there. So I don't know. I guess
No, there's nothing wrong with what you just said. That's
Okay.
actually, that's a very elaborate pick-off. That's a very nuanced bluff catch. And the reason that is okay, so we have him checking all top pairs on the river. So that means 2 pair are better, let me see. So if he's firing all of his misdraws and he's firing 2 pair or better, he's just going to have nothing 56% of the time. And coincidentally, that's your hand's equity on the river because you obviously don't beat any of his value combinations, which 56% equity is a boatload of equity. You can call any bet as long as it's not substantial. Here's my problem with that, Clayton. Here's the thing. You always want to count the number of assumptions you're making because if one of these is wrong, we have a huge problem. The first assumption we're making on this turn, he is betting every single open-ended straight draw. The second assumption we're making on this turn, he is betting every single flush draw. The third assumption we're going to be making on the river, he never value bets top pair. If we throw in the ace-king, that really skews things off. And there are guys that will fire that 3 times. And if this guy is a successful dude, he's got to know you're pretty capped there. He's got to know, well, this guy called out of the big blind. Everybody calls with everything out of the big blind. He might just have himself a jack 8. And by the way, I was doing all these numbers off of a complete river a complete river brick, which is, just another 2, an offsuit 2, let's say.
Right.
This doesn't account for we're also making the assumption the river bricks. There's a lot of diamonds. There's a lot of, let's count the cards that are bad for us. The ace of diamonds, the queen of diamonds, the 10 of diamonds, the 9 of diamonds, the 8 of diamonds, the 7 of diamonds, the 6 of diamonds, the 5 of diamonds, the 4 of diamonds, the 3 of diamonds, the 2 of diamonds, the 9 of clubs, the 9 of hearts, the 9 of spades. I guess ace of hearts, ace of clubs, ace of spades. Well, obviously not the ace of spades. We have that in our hand. A lot of hands fill. I think I just counted 15 cards there. So a third, whatever it was, it's coming a third of the time. And by the way, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying if you're right on all of these things, it is a very exciting play. It is very fun to watch. As a fan of poker, I am always in awe when people do a pick-off, a bluff catch like that. My problem is when I'm coaching, here's the thing. If you want to find how people bust their tournaments, I thought it would be a pretty good idea one day to find everybody busting their tournament and see what it was. It was always 1 pair, out of position, not really sure what was going on. Because it's just like all of investing. Like, would you want to invest in a ice cream shop in a Long Island City? Well, probably not, because you don't know anything about Long Island City real estate or an ice cream shop. Now, here's my problem here. I don't know if he's checking back ace king. I don't know if he's firing queen 10. So the real, I guess like the working class poker thing is just the majority of the time, the turn bet is going to be mostly value, right? So you got to kind of suck it up and give it up there. But if you're trying to be the best poker player in the world, that's obviously not a great solution, which is you are going to have to figure out, does this guy value bet ace king? Does this guy double barrel all of his queen 10s? Then this goes into verbal cues and stuff like that. Did he do any ostentatious behaviors during the hand? Is he kind of slamming the chips out there? Is he staring at your stack? Because people tend to quiet their body language when they have a really big hand. Was he doing anything like that?
No, and I'm definitely the one who observes my opponents very carefully. I mean, I'm mostly a live player. I do have some online experience, but I do feel like a big strength of my game is my powers of observation. And there was nothing that really stood out to me that he was trying to quiet his body or that he was, somehow excited that he had, flopped a set of kings or anything like that. I do agree that my call on the turn is a pretty ambitious tightrope walk, and I wasn't really sure what to do on that turn. I felt like I should I felt like I wanted to fold, but I also wanted to call, and unfortunately in poker you have to pick one.
Right. They don't let you.
You can't just do both. Yeah.
Right.
But my plan for calling on the river obviously is only the bricks. I'm not going to be able to call if it's a diamond or any of those cards that you mentioned that are going to hit his hand. But I'm thinking that he's going to shove or make another large bet at least on the bricks 30% of the time.
Well, here's the thing I'm thinking, Clayton. You work as a stand-up comic. There are certain people that do a lot better in live poker than people realize, and I notice there's a commonality between them. Musicians, taxi drivers, bartenders, people in working class jobs, and also immigrants, people that had to work with body language for the first 10 years they were in a country because they didn't understand every third, second, fourth word in a conversation. Those people tend to pick up body language very well. Now, if this is kind of the art of live poker, I'll give you my short answer when I'm teaching because I don't think most people have that, which is, look, the way to win at this table is to 3-bet every guy who's opening too much, freeze this guy out from pots in the future, and just give him this one. Most people don't have much of a double barrel bluffing game. I would just leave it to this one. That assumes no reads. That assumes no particular game, right? If your job is reading a room for a living, that is your job. It is very possible we're intellectualizing something you felt in your gut, which is, this is a draw. I know it's a draw. I think it's a draw. That's why my hand will not muck this hand. In which case, yeah, you have a call there. What I would do if I were you is I would keep a ledger of every time you did something you thought was a feel-based play. Now, if you find your accuracy on those is like 80%, 90% or higher, you have a tremendous gift that many poker players, including myself, do not have.
I do that, actually. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Alex, but I wanted to tell you I actually do that. I log every hand that I play where I feel like I go away from theory because of a read. And I do analyze how many of those hands I'm right on. And my average is right around 62%. So it's not the 85 or 90 or whatever. But when I go off the script because of a sense of somebody, I'm typically right. About 62% of the time I'm right. I need to be clear, though. In this case, I wasn't getting a sense that he was that strong, but I also wasn't all that sure that he had a draw. It's not like my read told me he had a draw. It's just I was looking for some sign that he had a monster, and I didn't see that. Yeah, so it's different than saying, oh, I feel that he's weak, and my reads are telling me he's weak. It's just that my reads were not telling me he was particularly strong, and so that's what made it a difficult situation. I think that all things considered, this turn is a fold. But I did call, and I had my reasons, but I'm not crazy about the call at this point.
Okay, so I think the way you could do this better in the future and maybe bring that 62 up to 70 or 80, the thing I noticed is when I ventured away from what the script tells me to do, it was very much in my gut. This sounds so new-earthy or whatever, but there's so many. If you're ever convincing yourself to do it, I find that's usually when you're putting yourself on, right? But there's sometimes like it just punches you in the face where it's like, you can't fold to this guy. And so I think what you're telling me is you didn't feel the punch. Sometimes you feel the punch. This time it wasn't the punch. It was the, damn it, I don't want to fold, right? So, okay, so we call on this turn. What happens on the river?
Yeah, I'll move on, but it wasn't so much like, damn it, I don't want to fold. It was more like, damn it, I wish he would give me something that would let me fold, and I didn't pick it up. Yeah. I was trying to find the fold, and he didn't help me, which most of the time players do help me when I'm leaning that direction. So I called, and like I say, at this point, looking back on the hand and analyzing it after the fact, I think that's a fold if I'm not more sure that he's got the bluffs there. So anyway, now I call, and we have this 51-75 pot, and the river's the 8 of hearts. Not exactly the brick we talked about, but it's also not a huge card. I guess the 10-9 got there. That's the only draw that really came in, unless you count 8-7. Yeah. So anyway, I check again, and my opponent shoves for his remaining 4,400 into 51-75, and if I call and win the pot, I get a $300 bounty. Let's not forget.
Oh yeah.
Of course, if I call and lose the pot, I don't get that bounty.
Right.
So it's a really big bet, 4,400 into 51-75. And again, in my experience playing $1,000 tournaments at the World Series of Poker and elsewhere, this doesn't feel like a one pair hand. Like he's played this hand very strongly for it being one pair. So to me, I feel like I'm trying to decide whether he's got a monster, or by which I mean at least two pair, and it's kind of hard for him to have two pair when I have a jack. Not impossible, of course, but I do block some of those two pairs. And then, the sets, like I don't block king, right? And I don't block 7-7. So to me, that's what I'm up against. I feel like I'm kind of subtracting one pair hands, including pocket aces, from my opponent's range, just because you don't typically see. I mean, can you tell me, do you see players play aces this way or ace king this way?
Yeah, if a guy's got a real kill shot, there are guys that I think the way you can identify the extremely successful pros versus the average to good to meddling pros is you just see that hunger to get that last bet. And a lot of those guys just can't help themselves on the river. If they think you're capped at like a king 10 or an ace jack there or something, that ace king is going in. And they know you're tempted to call with that bounty. I definitely think, and that kind of throws things off, because if you can throw in some top pairs there, your equity is going to go into you being right about a quarter of the time. Whereas I think right now you're right about 40, 50% of the time. I'm not playing with my Flopzilla anymore, so I'm just let me play with it a bit. I think I don't have it perfect, but yeah, it looks like 40.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first thing you should do, ask him if he's ever seen a baby pigeon. Like that. I'm serious. Like, look dead in his eye and very seriously go, have you ever seen a baby pigeon? Because when a guy's not bluffing, a lot of times you'll get a what the hell did you just say? And then sometimes the guy just freezes up, and that's tension, right? Now, there's 100 of these. That one is from Brad Booth. Brad Booth used to ask that to people because people would just kind of laugh and go, what the hell are you talking about? And they would kind of give off, hey, I'm calm, right? And we didn't do the work before this, but a really good thing to pay attention to when you play live poker is people's baseline comfort. Some guys get really nervous with a hand because they're excited. There's other guys that I'll give you one. I got lucky enough to be right with a hand just like this. I called 3 streets down, which I don't do normally, with second pair in WPT Montreal, and I caught the kid with jack high. But the reason I did that is I saw the kid with an overpair earlier, and he looked bored out of his mind. And the kid spoke French, so I couldn't talk to him. But he looked very nervous that hand. And I tried smiling at him to see if he'd smile back. He did try to smile a little bit. It looked a little forced. I went, all right, buddy, if you got me, you got me. And he had jack high. And I think Mike Leah used to always ask, did the flush draw come in or something like that? Go Leafs, go A. I've seen him do that live, like really well. I've seen him get people talking. Him and like Negreanu, it's much more within the context of the game. I think you should just say the most off-the-wall thing you can think of, like, have you ever visited South Korea? What if God was one of us? Do you find Michelle Obama attractive? Et cetera, et cetera. And if you get like a very like, what the hell did you just say reaction. That's one of two things. That's a pro who's very calm while he's bluffing, which does exist. I had one of those guys at the WCP main event last year. Kid just totally worked me. I got him talking. I haven't seen a guy that comfortable in a big bluff in a long time, and he got me, and he showed me the bluff, and I was like, you got it. You won. But most of the time you can suss out. The fun part about live poker is you still can look at the guy, right? You don't lose anything taking a second and looking at the guy, right? As far as what you should do, my full belief is we should have been out on the turn. If this were me, I'm out on the turn. Absent a read, I'm going to assume a good Euro player has a kill shot with ace king here, aces, and in which case I really can't be calling. And by the way, I don't want this to sound like a noble thing. This is me giving up. This is just me. Poker tournaments are a series of investment decisions, and I fully admit there are some I have no idea what the hell is going on. I wish I was better. I'm not. But the way you make money is you avoid those situations early and often. And when you do find a favorable situation, you freeze people out. You get it heads up, position bigger pot, superior hands, heads up yourself versus the weaker players at the table. I do not like how we inflated this pot. Not inflated this pot, but if we call on this river, you better have a damn good reason to do so. And I don't know if we have that, do we?
Yeah, exactly. We don't have that. And again, I don't like the call on the turn either. I feel like that's a mistake that leads us to another potential huge mistake here.
I mean, it's not bad. Like, a lot of guys will double barrel bluff, but they don't really have a triple barrel. So, like, you can call turn and fold river. The problem I worry about is we get to that river and it's like, God, we're just, as poker players, we're so close to that cocaine drip. You know what I mean? Like, catching a guy in a bluff is like the closest you'll ever get to an orgasm in live poker, right? You know, true. Just like, yeah, here's the second pair, buddy. Hand me the chips, right? So the problem is that temptation is so there. And the great thing about live poker, let's say you're wrong. Let's say the guy shows 3 kings. You can just go ace king, good hand, and fold, right? Nobody has. Right. Oh wait, no, this is an all in, and he gets to see your hand. Never mind, I'm full of it. But yeah, anyway, if this were cash, that would be a thing. But yeah, so what do we end up doing? I'm curious now.
Yeah, so we don't end up with getting anything off of him. Like, I did talk to him a little bit. I tried to ask him. I tried to get a sense of how strong he was. So basically the only evidence I have as to whether this guy is strong or weak is his bet sizing. And I mentioned earlier that in a previous hand he had bet small when he was bluffing. And if you don't have any other reads, you can usually go with the bet sizing. And in the moment, I don't know if I got intoxicated by the thrill of calling off a bluff. I don't know if I got excited about winning another bounty. I'd already collected one earlier. But I did call, and my opponent had ace king.
Ooh, well done.
And that was the kill shot. And I just, I made a lot of mistakes in this hand. I don't like the way I played the turn, and obviously not happy about the river either. I think that this hand tells me a lot about, what I need to avoid this summer when I go out there. I don't need to go up against the other good player at the table and try to prove that I can call him down all the way with second pair, especially because some of these guys have, as you called it, that kill shot. So
Right. And I mean, to be fair to you also, I think what happened is one of the things I'm most critical about when it comes to American regs is they have no triple barrel for value. They don't want it. It is something, not to get on a rant, but if most of your value hands in non-limit hold'em are going to be pairs, 10% or more of the time you're going to flop 2 pair or better. And anybody can play that. A 5-year-old can play those hands. Just keep betting, right? 30% or 20, 25% of the time you're going to flop a pair. And the rest of the time, or 30% of the time, you're going to flop a pair. And the rest of the time, you're going to have nothing. How you play those pairs is going to determine whether you are a successful poker pro, a mediocre poker pro, or just another guy quitting after 4 years. And there are a lot of American regs who the first thing they think when they flop a pair is, how can I keep this pot small? If what you're going to do with 75% of your value hands is think about how can I make the least money, you are going to lose. And there are a lot of American regs that are peddling this pot control strategy, they're super worried about firing that river, in which case I think you would have a very valid point there, which is I've even seen guys check a set there, right? But like it's very easy I've seen ridiculous hands get checked there, and it's one of the hardest things for me coaching is, a lot of the Americans will check back the aces on that river because, I don't know, this pot's big enough or something like that. But that's a very specialized read. And I think it's really funny because we were talking about in my TPE videos versus a guy from this country, you should do this, versus a guy from this country, you should do that. At this buy-in level, do that. Live, you should do that. Online, you should do that. In this hand, I think you had a damn good point versus an American. I think you took that and applied it to a Brit who likely has learned if he wants to pay for his supper, he's going to have to learn to triple barrel for value. That is one of the things, if you are around a long time, you're going to have to develop that. And this is a very clear situation to triple barrel us aces, ace king, because you called out of the big blind, you could have king five of clubs right here, and you might not be folding on the river because, hey, there's a missed straight draw and a flush draw. That's a couple things I could pick off. But the American guy will say like, he could have had king eight, he could have had king seven, it was big enough or whatever. And that to me it's disappointing because when you most likely have the best of it and you try to make those pots the biggest, it's a very simple way to make a lot of money in no limit hold'em, and it doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar. But I think you just took an American-centric strategy and you applied it to a guy that might not apply to.
Well, really good stuff, Alex. I agree with everything you said, and this is a hand that has haunted me. I played a ton of poker last summer. I think I played 26 or 27 tournaments last summer, and this is one that haunted me. Even though I ended up, getting all those chips back and whatever, it doesn't matter what happened next. It's just this is a hand that I didn't feel good about. And lately on the podcast, I have been talking about a lot of hands that I've played very well. So I just wanted to bring up one where I got owned and see how bad it was.
Right. Well, and I mean, the other thing, bring up Kobe. Kobe didn't hit every shot, man.
Right.
But he sure shot. You know what I mean? It's one of those things you learn from it. Everything I am teaching you is I have made every mistake in the book, in poker, 10 or 20 times just to make sure I really got it, right? I have called off there. I cannot tell you how many times. And it wasn't until the 20th time I didn't catch him I realized he's never bluffing here. Yeah. Damn it, right? Or, you catch him one time out of 20 and you're like, I'm a genius. And then you look at it's so cool you keep a ledger because, I used to keep a ledger and I was nowhere near 62%. I'll tell you that. And once I found that, I started making a real nuts and bolts poker strategy that helped me a lot. And I still teach from that playbook. It's really effective. But you went for the gold. It didn't work this time.
Well, my father told me once that my mother was a serious poker player, but my dad was not. He liked to actually gamble. So, he told me once that sometimes when he's playing roulette, he just knows the next spin is going to be a zero or a red or whatever. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, Dad, you might be right. Let's test it, okay? We'll go play some roulette, and every time you're sure something's going to happen, you tell me before the ball lands. And if you're right more than half the time, I'll never bug you about this again.
Now, how do you take that?
He said, okay, let's do it. I'm going to prove that I'm psychic. And then he lost like 5 in a row. And he's like, maybe you're onto something, Clayton.
Oh, my God. See, this is another case. This is why when everybody says you got to be an optimist in life, optimism will cover all, will fix everything. An optimist is a guy who gets 20 in blackjack and says, hit me. that's another case where non-existent self-esteem has its rewards. I highly recommend it for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, Alex, before we wrap up, just let everybody know how they can find you. This has been an unbelievable discussion for me. You know, I've listened to you on other shows. My first time actually getting to talk with you on the podcast. And first of all, thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with me. And let everybody know how they can find you.
Yeah, if you guys want to get in touch with me, my Twitter is @the_Assassinato. You can go to my ancient blog, which looks like fried dog turds, but and pokerheadrush.com, and in the top right, you can sign up for my newsletter if you just want to see any. I send out my new articles and stuff like that, all the free stuff on the internet. That's where I kind of put it together. Or like this podcast will be going out to that newsletter just so people can see it. And yeah, you can just write me at alex@pokerheadrush.com if you want to say hi, and I'll be sure to say hi back. Thank you for tuning into this.
There you go, alex@pokerheadrush.com. So for Alex Fitzgerald, for Dr. Richard Feynman, for Matt Stout, for Daniel Negreanu, for Danny, and for Derek, and everybody else at Tournament Poker Edge, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you guys for listening.
Like they do in Texas plays. Fold 'em, let 'em hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me. I love it. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, it's not rough, it isn't fun.